Welcome to the Princeton Podcast, where we talk about upcoming events, news, and local businesses. This is Princeton. Play here, stay here.
Before we get started today, just a reminder to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're also recording on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe at This is Princeton MN.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by Princeton Public Utilities. I'm Zach Kitzman, here with Kim Young and Mary Padnode. We're going to start today off with some upcoming events that are happening in Princeton. Kim, lead us off.
All right. Thanks, Zach. So coming up on April 27th is the community table at Trinity Crossing from 4:30 to 6:30. That is a free event to attend, and I believe they're also looking for volunteers, so check that out. On April 29th is the City Nature Challenge BioBlitz from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Oak Savannah Learning Center at Sherburne National Wildlife Refuge. There is no need to register for this, and what you'll be doing is competing in a challenge to identify and take photos of wildlife, plants, and fungi with an iNaturalist app, so that sounds like a lot of fun. There is a lot going on May 6th. In the morning, there is a bird tour at Menomin Trail at the refuge from 8 to 10 a.m. Yeah, there's the bird. Along with this,
it wasn't very good.
There we go.
I can hear the chickadees now.
Yes. And then at the refuge on that same day from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. is the spring celebration, which will be taking place at the Oak Savannah Learning Center. Then later on that afternoon on May 6th is the Just for Kicks performance at the high school. And then in the other gym at the high school following that event will be a craft fair at the high school. And then later on that day on May 6th is the Dirty Rotten Biker Fest, which will be taking place at the Mille Lacs County Fairgrounds. So it sounds like a fun week coming up. Just a reminder that you can always find out everything that's going on by visiting our website at www.thisisprincetonmn.co and clicking on events, and you'll find that under the Things to Do tab. So be sure and check that out to keep up what's going on. So now I'll turn it over to Mary to introduce today's guest.
We are excited about our next guest, who is probably one of the best storytellers around. We are welcoming Barry Schreiber from the Mille Lacs County Historical Society. I'm especially excited as I am a huge history buff, love history. Barry walked in with some props and visual aids today to assist him in some storytelling, so let's get started. Welcome to our podcast, Barry.
Thanks so much, Mary.
Thank you.
Be seated, yes. I've been called a lot of things before, but a storyteller is not the worst of them, I assure you.
I love it.
Well, let me share a little bit about what's going on at the Mille Lacs County Historical Society. I've been a volunteer there for 20 years, I guess, or something like that.
Wow.
I know. Who knew? But things have really gotten done in the last decade or so, and we're having a lot of fun. We also are always looking for interested volunteers. Could be as little as 4 hours a month. And we've got fun things to do. We've had some Princeton High School National Honor Society students help us out with transferring, get this, talk about deep in the history weeds. Recently, at the Princeton Township Hall in Long Siding, they were doing some tidying up, and they found 4 ledgers of births and deaths from the late 1890s that had not been known of before.
What? Wow.
Yeah, and these are some names that folks in this area will recognize. We wish to merge those birth records and death records with our now 4x6 card files. And National Honor Society folks have been coming around and really getting things done. So if you get history, this is kind of good stuff. And if you've got deep family roots in the area, you'll recognize some of these names. One of the first I came across, this is for the old timers out there, Grover Umbahacker.
Oh, yeah.
The ice guy.
Uh-huh.
The ice guy.
Yeah.
Yep.
We have his.
I'm not an old timer, by the way.
we have the first known version of Grover Umbacher's birth record. And it's just kind of cool to know that these still exist. They were forgotten for more than 100 years, and they've just bubbled up to the surface as things sometimes do. So that's one of the projects that we've been working on with volunteers. I've been advertised as a storyteller. I will tell a story. You can tune out if you wish.
Please tune in. There's going to be some great stuff.
Yes.
Either figuratively or literally. Don't go to the bathroom just yet, because we've got some interesting stuff. In 2015, the Mille Lacs County Historical Society was the most appreciative recipient of a major gift from Ken Amdahl, Princeton High School class of 1943.
What was that last name?
Amdall, Amdahl.
Amdahl, okay.
Yeah. And Ken gave a couple major gifts in memory of his wife, Betty Umbacher Amdahl. And Betty had passed a couple years earlier, and both Betty and Ken were classmates at Princeton High School in 1943. They graduated in the class of 43.
Okay.
And Ken wanted to give something back to the community. He has since passed also, but that gift by Ken Amdahl, those gifts, plural, by Ken Amdahl, prompted a major update in the meeting room of the depot, which was, the meeting room is where people vote in Princeton. A lot of events are held there. From this weekend, there's a baby shower. There are celebrations of life, so we've got everything, and marriages in between, plus family parties and graduations and all those kinds of things
We
going
just
on.
had our hockey banquet there a couple weeks ago.
You did. Yes, you did. And a lot of work went into that, I could tell.
Yep.
So I hope a good time was had by all. While we were refitting that space, which was the freight house of the Princeton Great Northern Depot, it was cold storage. It was dark in there. There was a wood plank floor. And it was where stuff that was coming off a train got left until the eventual recipient in Princeton or nearby could come and fetch it. It was a place where people who had things to ship out on the train could leave their thing, whether it was a bag of seed or a dollhouse or whatever was getting shipped, until the correct train came along for that. So it was a kind of nothing special space. It was out of the weather in the sense of precipitation. It was cold in there in the wintertime. When the depot went from railroad ownership into city ownership in the late 1970s, it was updated somewhat, and bathrooms were put in, a small kitchen was put in, and we took it to the next level, and we decided to give it a little atmosphere. As you probably saw, Mary, we built some false trusses in the ceiling. We upgraded the power, we upgraded the lighting. It's LED lighting in there on dimmers now, and it's a very pleasant space. In the process, see, here's the Shaggy Dog intro to this. In the process of doing that, we took down drywall that was covering the south wall interior of the space. And we came across some graffiti on the wall. That's the only way you can describe it. There was kind of a cement wash that was placed on the wall. So kind of white. It was impossible to remove this substance, probably masonry in orientation, without sandblasting. So we had to sandblast the wall to get this stuff off.
Wow.
But this graffiti, remember, it's dark, it's cold in there, and somebody, and we have a date certain on this drawing. The date was 11/14 or November 14th. We see it over the man's right shoulder in the left-hand side of this graffiti. And that had to be November of 1914, because in 2014 there was drywall
Right.
over the wall. So this had been waiting patiently for a century or so to be revealed to us. And we looked a little more closely, and we saw that part of the graffiti, which is chipped away and beat up a little bit, had what appears to be a handshake by the two men
Oh, yeah.
in that graffiti.
This is so cool.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's good graffiti, too.
Yeah, it's talented, yeah. And what we believe this represents is a deal being made by the Odegaard brothers. You see the graffiti Odegaard brothers up above. And O.J. Odegaard, who was an entrepreneur of considerable note in Princeton, told the story many times of driving the horse-drawn carriage. When the train arrived at the depot, he'd pick up passengers who came down to the commercial hotel downtown. And it was too far to walk if you've got a suitcase. Apparently they did not have roller bags back in the day.
No.
And probably...
It's unfortunate.
Yes, tragic, I would
Yeah.
say. One of the many hardships of pioneer life.
Much heavier, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get a hitch a ride with the carriage. And O.J. had that job, driving the carriage, the horse-drawn carriage, from the depot to the hotel as one of his jobs. He was very industrious and picked up a lot of little gigs around town. On one day, O.J. recounted, driving the horse-drawn carriage into town. He's 18 years old at the time. He was born in 1896. So it's 1914. War's breaking out in Europe. Nasty things are going on still.
Yeah.
And O.J. asks his passenger, a gentleman, may I ask what brings you to Princeton today? And the man said, well, I'm looking for someone who can represent my product, be a sales representative for my company. And O.J. further queried the man, may I ask what your product is? And he said, I'm working for the Ford Motor Company. We are marketing an automobile, which we think is going to be very big in the near future. And O.J. said, well, tell me a little bit more about what you need from this sort of local representative. And they talked for 2 hours. And at the end of the 2 hours, the regional sales representative for Ford Motor Company thought to himself, this guy can do it. He's 18 years old, but this guy, O.J. Odegaard, can sell my car. But the problem was, in order to have a legally binding contract, you had to be 21. O.J. was 18. So the handshake represents, we believe, O.J. enlisting the help of an older brother to form Odegaard Brothers Ford Motor Company. O.J. did the work. He was the guy, but he needed an older brother, 21 years old plus, who
Wow.
could sign the contract. And, that was just too good to sandblast off the wall.
Oh, my gosh. You guys have got to see this.
Yeah. So that was a fun part of our remodeling project. You never know what you're going to come across when you start taking an historic building apart, peeling off layers of drywall and discovering buried layers of local history.
In Odegaard, they were Odegaard Motors, Odegaard.
I think it was Odegaard Motors. I remember their like logo on the back of cars.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's how I then later learned that they were more known for potatoes.
Oh, yes. Yes, stay tuned. Because we have an exhibit coming up titled Potatoes, a special exhibit. Potatoes, Peat, and Prisoners of War. And we've collected a great deal of information, fabulous photographs, I might add, of the potato growing business around here. Princeton was, at one time, what Idaho purports to be today in terms of the center of the potato world.
Wow.
And OJ was, in many respects, the baron of potatoes in this area. There were potato warehouses lining the tracks. There were several of them, many of them, where potatoes got stored and processed and prepared for shipment. One of the iconic photos of the depot was taken in 1937, and it shows, the caption is, "A solid trainload of potatoes and onions grown by O.J. Odegaard, September 1937." So it's the Depression. It's Dust Bowl days in a lot of places in the country. And O.J.'s farming potatoes up on the bog, which has a unique ability to maintain moisture. Right place, right time, right idea, right equipment. And O.J. was the potato baron. Aren't you going to ask, Zach,
Yeah.
what about the prisoners of war?
Yeah, but what about the best part of the prisoner of war?
Thank you.
Okay.
I thought we'd never get to that. In 1943, the Princeton young men in the National Guard had been called up, and they went off to war. You know, we were thick in it after December 7th, 1941. So the Princeton boys, as they were called then, got called up, and many of them got shipped over to North Africa, curiously. And then they proceeded into Italy to do terrible fighting up the boot of Italy towards Germany. And ironically, in some respects, there were so many prisoners being taken by both sides during these epic battles. In some battles, 100,000 enemy troops would be captured. 100,000, which is, great. We take these 100,000 people out of service, but now what do we do with them? We've got to house them, confine them, take care of their medical needs, feed them, when food may be short in our country. So the POW camps by 1943 had filled up in Great Britain, Scotland. France was occupied, so we can't, and much of Europe was occupied by the Nazis at that point. So there's no room on continental Europe for Allied POWs. So they started shipping the POWs back. We were sending war material over in these Liberty ships, and on the way back, we're sending back prisoners of war.
To the United States.
Yeah. There's a huge POW camp down in Missouri, and about midsummer, they ask, does anybody have any need for prisoners of war? O.J. was the first one, we believe, who requested prisoners of war to do farm work, particularly to bring in the potato crop.
Right.
Because the Princeton young men were gone. They were off to North Africa and Italy. And as it happened, we got a trainload of Italian prisoners of war that came up here. Do we dare try an audio clip from?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're game for that.
let's try it.
All right.
I'm excited.
First
Well,
time.
I thought maybe, we're polymodal here. Let me see if I can bring this up. And
I remember Dad talking about how he would, when the train would take potatoes off, and Grandpa was working, and a bunch would fall off naturally,
Oh, yeah.
or and so Grandma would say, "Kids, go grab some potatoes off the track."
For dinner.
and during the Depression, there's several accounts of people who would send the kids to walk the tracks after the coal train went through. They had hopper cars that had coal piled on top. And if the engineer saw people out with a bucket or a bag picking coal from the side of the tracks, it was not uncommon for the engineer to hit the brakes sharply a couple times.
Scare 'em?
So it would
No.
drop off.
So it would drop a little more coal by the side of the tracks, which was kind of cool.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is.
Sure.
You know,
Cool.
we're all in this together.
That's
These-
right.
These are hard times,
Yeah.
but we're all in this together. So imagine, if you can, living in Princeton in 1943. There's been a lot of war propaganda, about and these horrible racist stereotypes of what the Japs look like, and buck teeth and yellow skin, and there were some terrible things that went on in the Second World War, no doubt about that. But here comes to Princeton, Minnesota, a trainload of Italian prisoners of war. And they're going to work north of town in the potato fields. Here's the recollection of one depot visitor named Marlene. Let me see if I can get this spooled up for you.
Okay, go ahead, Marlene.
Okay. In 1943, when we still lived up at Long Siding, it was in the middle of World War II, and everybody got word that a train was coming into Princeton with prisoners of war coming to work in the Odegaard potato fields and beyond. And the prisoners had to come here to work because they brought them here. People were curious, why would they ship them all the way from overseas, from Germany and Italy?
Yeah.
Bring them all the way over here, what that cost. It didn't cost as much as probably an economic crisis we would have had because all our young men were off fighting the war, and the women had gone to work in the factories and the war manufacturing munitions plants and stuff. So we didn't have anybody here, and our economy would have been worse.
Yes.
Than probably the Depression in 29, and so it was cheaper to bring thousands and thousands over to this country, and I think Princeton got some of the very first ones, and I had always thought they were German prisoners of war that came, but they weren't. They were Italian. I found that out recently. So anyway, everybody heard that the prisoner of war train was coming through, and none of us knew what do these foreign people look like.
Yeah.
Are they monsters? I mean,
Yeah.
when I was a child, I was 8. I didn't know what to expect. So we came right down here to this depot then, and we all stood out there, and I think most of the town was there to see this train come in. It was like a freak show. And we were standing right up in front, and the train stopped here, and there were a lot of soldiers with them, American soldiers with them that had brought them, and the men all got off the train. And
Thanks, Tara. Mark, come back again, will you? Did you sign our book? Thank you so much.
And the men were allowed to get off the train and walk around, stretch their legs and that before they continued on to wherever they were going to go. And again, I was 8, so I don't remember what the plan was, but I remember standing there towards the front of the line and watching these men get off the train. And gee, they look like regular people to me, And they were, but the crowd is watching. And again, this is like 70 years ago, or 70, So one little girl, all of a sudden, was about 3 or 4 years old. She broke free from her mom and dad, and she raced up to the men, and she threw herself against one of these prisoners and wrapped her arms around his legs and hugged him.
Aww.
And there was a collective gasp, of course, that went up from the crowd.
Yeah.
Because what's he going to do? He bent down and he picked her up. Oh my God, everybody was scared to death. What's going to go on? We had no idea what prisoners of war were.
Yes.
And till we heard him sobbing and saw the tears streaming down his cheeks. And then one of the soldiers came and told the crowd not to worry. He had told them he had a little girl back home. And about that age, and he missed her so terribly, and that's why he was clinging to this child.
Oh, sweet.
And I think we all learned a lesson that day, that these were human beings just the same as we were, and they didn't want to be fighting in the war any more than our soldiers did, but they had no choice coming from over there.
Great. Great. Thank you so much, Marlene. It's just terrific.
I didn't
Wow.
expect all
What a
this today,
story.
Yeah.
but this is just-
Yeah, I guess you don't really think about that they wouldn't have ever seen.
No, no.
I mean, I like how she described we're all standing out there like it was a freak show. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, truth be told, there are not a lot of folks, Mediterranean folks, who settled around here. A lot of Scandinavian, German folks, but the Mediterranean folks. And can you imagine what these guys look like? You know, they were, olive-skinned. They were having their hair oiled back. They were working in those, cut-off T-shirts, slinging these bags of potatoes around at the potato warehouses, and everyone remembers them singing Italian songs while they're working. And the young ladies were cautioned, you stay away from those guys.
Right.
You stay away
Yeah.
from them. And, the 14-year-old girls are going, hubba, hubba.
Yeah. Good looking Italian.
heck no.
Check this out, would you? And one young lady, Joyce Kornman, who was a daughter of the mill owner at the south of the 10th Avenue South, where the depot is, went across the street, unbeknownst to her parents, with an autograph book one day. And she collected the autographs of a dozen or 15 of the Italian prisoners of war. And her son, Robbie Edmonds, has that document. And it's sort of this size with a Western motif on the cover. He said, you can photograph this, but it's going to stay with the family. I said, absolutely fine. And we have photographed that. We'll present some of these pages in the Potatoes Pete Prisoners of War exhibit also. But
When do you expect that to be ready?
as soon as we get some volunteers down there to help us out.
Okay, yes.
Plug. We've got a busy summer coming up. We can already see summer. I can tell you about that in a minute, but hopefully by the end of the year.
Okay.
Hopefully by the end of the year. Among other events, we have the National Convention of the Great Northern Railway Historical Society coming to Princeton on Tuesday, July 25th. And we've got to, polish our brass bell and get things all tidied up for that event. There'll be about 100 and some people coming over by coach from St. Cloud, which is the home of the 5-day convention in St. Cloud. So that's on the docket. June 10th, during Rum River Days, we're going to have an open house at the depot. We've been hunkered down with COVID, for 3 years, and we have gotten a great deal done behind the scenes, but we miss the human being side of things. And this is, in some respects, our coming out of COVID party.
Yeah.
And we will have all the attractions at the depot will be open from 10 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's a Saturday, June 10th, at the depot. The caboose will be open, the Pioneer School will be open, the depot will be open, the Amdahl Room will be open. You can have a chance to look at this graffiti if you're interested. The recently restored Long's Siding Depot will be open also. And cookies, coffee, and a fun time to get to see your neighbors, which is part of the idea
That's
of
right.
Rum River Days also. So mark that on your calendar.
We'll get that marketed out to
through Rum River Festival, yeah.
Yeah.
So if somebody, that was one of my questions about the depot or the Historical Society is, do you want to talk about the hours and can people just show up and take their
We've
own
got,
tours and how does that work?
Right now, we're open Wednesdays and Fridays.
Okay, to the public?
Yeah,
Okay.
from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m., Wednesdays and Fridays. There are people there a lot of other days.
Yeah.
But we're building exhibits and doing all that stuff. But we would like to expand our hours. We're just kind of crawling out from underneath COVID. And we're looking forward to this very much. If people are interested to talk with me about volunteering, I've got a phone number, 763-607-3195. That number again? No, I won't do that. Operators are standing by.
We'll post it for you. And
So
your
I have a-
phone will just ring, ring, ring.
I have a question for you. When we talk about the different the gifts that you receive, the donations you receive, as far as,
Yeah.
the item you have there with the ice cream maker, it makes me wonder how things are made today. I was looking at that bucket, and it's just. It makes me wonder if that will eventually end because things aren't made like they used to be.
And they're not sold like they used to be either. You buy things, I do too, from China.
Right.
You've never been in that shop, have you? But we buy things, and through a amazingly well developed system, there's feedback and other people's input about, do you like this product or not? That means something to sellers as well as to buyers. So, and part of what the mission of the history operation is, first of all, it's our mission to collect, preserve, and present information about the area. And when we say preserve, we intend to keep items that we accept for 200 years. That sounds like a crazy long time. But we have items in our collection that are 160 years old.
Sure.
I'll mention an event coming up this Saturday, for example, April 22nd. There is an event at Oak Knoll Cemetery. That sounds like a fun place. We were contacted by a group which wishes to remember the contribution of Union soldiers in the Civil War. And Princeton has many more than we knew Civil War veterans.
Wow.
A lot came from the state of Maine. And this group is organizing an event to remember the last known Civil War veteran in the county, which is a guy named Malkson, Malkson. And on Saturday, at that gravesite in Oak Knoll, there will be a American Legion Honor Guard salute. There will be Mayor Tom Walker's going to have a few words to say, and the organizer Jim Johnson from Brainerd will have a few words to say. And it's just part of recognizing who we are. Jim Johnson's been doing research. We knew of about 3 or 4 or 5 Civil War veterans that were buried around here. Jim Johnson says there's 145 Civil War veterans that are buried around here. Yeah, so that's part of our roots also, and we don't need to dwell on it, but we need to remember it.
Honor that.
And same thing with the potato business. It's just interesting,
It is.
It's just a fun story, and you can almost imagine with Marlene's account of the Italian prisoners of war getting off the train, you're almost transported to that time. I felt the suspense. They're wondering, is this man going to bash this child's head on the stone platform of the depot?
Yeah.
Well, especially considering what was happening during wartime.
Yeah,
I can see why parents would be
Oh,
frightened.
of course. The ugly stereotypes are maybe necessary to promote aggression towards the other guys.
Right, yep.
Not realizing that they probably are not that keen about getting shot at any more than
Right.
our guys are, you know.
We're all human. And
Yeah.
As soon as they get off the train and they see that, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's like heart.
I also have a
warming.
3-year-old.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah. So,
real quick, we're gonna run to a quick commercial break, but when we come back, I wanted to ask you, Barry, about the smoking gun letter.
all right.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Most Americans get their electricity from large corporations that care more about turning a profit for their stockholders than taking care of their customers. But your community is served by a different kind of utility, a utility you own. Today, more than 2,000 communities across the country get electricity from public power utilities like yours. We're community-owned and not-for-profit, so we make decisions with you in mind. And we give back to our community because we live and work here too. Public power puts the power in the hands of the people. So speak up.
Welcome back. So Barry, you had brought in some you brought in quite a bit of stuff. You have a ice cream maker that you had shown us earlier that honestly is very opening of how they would create stuff, and you went and explained how they were able to churn two
flavors at once.
Yeah.
At once. That's cool.
Yeah. Talk about high tech, huh?
Well, yeah.
Really?
Honestly.
There we go.
Yeah.
And we're going to have pictures up on the website, on the Facebook page, so that those of you listening will be able to look at all of these visuals that Barry brought in.
And then also down here you have.
Yeah, let me pull this up. And this is a letter that was discovered in the files of the Great Northern Railway that are now owned by the Great Northern Railway Historical Society. And this is down the basement of the Jackson Street Roundhouse in St. Paul. And, you know, it's as close to a dungeon as you've probably experienced. There are sprinkler pipes that you have to duck under, and there are rows and rows of file cabinets. And these were, at one time, owned by the Great Northern Railroad. And the railroad was a big business, and they had to keep track of all kinds of things going on at every station location. And there is a file folder of information about improvements, changes, equipment removed at Princeton, Minnesota.
Okay.
So that was of great interest. In that file was this letter dated May 26th, 1902. The end of May 1902. Bear in mind the grand opening of this depot, the brick 215-foot long Queen Anne style structure that exists today, was opened in January of 1903, sort of 7 months later. This was the letter that got things going. And in this letter was written by a guy named Robert Dunn, D-U-N-N. And he was, I think, the grandfather of recently deceased Bob Dunn. And he ran for elected office and was elected as a state auditor. And the state auditor has the power to set valuation of properties. The railroad owned a lot of property, miles and miles, square miles of property, which it was given by the state as an incentive to build a railroad, which was, you know, the super highway of its day.
Sure.
And Princeton, when the railroad came through in 1886, got the standard small town depot. Princeton only had 700 or so people at the time, and this is the Pease Depot, which was built in the same style as the Princeton Depot. It's a 24 by 48 feet, kind of a wooden frame building, shake roof. It had an office, which was in the center of the building. It had, on the right of this photo, enlarged photo, you see a sliding door, which was the freight room of the depot. Again, this is the Pease Depot, but it's built in exactly the same template as the first Princeton Depot.
So this picture is, so I just read that letter, and the picture that you're showing right now is what he was referring to as plain,
Yeah, yes.
with nothing, no electricity, no.
Right, this is the bare bones depot.
Yep.
On the left is the passenger waiting area. In the center was the double window. It's actually a bay window sticking out a little bit. This would be the track side of the building. And the larger door on the right hand is a sliding door that was where the freight stuff got dollied in.
Yep.
or was waiting.
So this is what he's asking be redone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't want it redone. We want it out of there.
Oh,
And he's asking for a, let me quote him. It's just a couple portions of this letter that are just really precious. This is Bob Dunn. He's writing on letterhead from the auditor of the state of Minnesota. That's his job.
Yep.
And it's typewritten letter, done by a typewriter, and the continuation page, which usually doesn't get letterhead because it's expensive, also is letterhead. So in case you missed it on the front page, on the second page, I'm reminding you, I'm the auditor of this state, in very friendly terms, of course. And Bob Dunn says, I've highlighted in yellow here, I think if you were to see to it, Mr. Hill, this is James J. Hill, the president of the railroad, you would
Okay.
immediately give orders for the erection of a new brick depot. I hope and trust you will see your way clear to have a brick depot erected there this year. I editorialize, are you nuts? Because it's the end of May.
Yeah.
By December in Minnesota? Come on. I am certain that it would be to the advantage of the Great Northern as well as to the citizens of Princeton. He closes the letter by saying, this is Bob Dunn speaking again, help us out in this depot matter, Mr. Hill, and you and your company will never have cause to regret your action. Just saying, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not,
Wow.
I'm
That
not
is like,
I'm not-
you're gonna do this.
I'm not promising anything here, but, yeah. So, we don't know if there was ever any outright financial compensation here,
Yeah.
but there's a strong suggestion that there was.
And I love how he says, the shabby little depot.
Besides
Yeah.
being inadequate,
Yeah.
it gives strangers a poor impression of the place. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So imagine with me, this is the end of May, and plans have to be drawn up. Got to go to the architects. We have to requisition materials. The Kettle River sandstone platform has to be, how many, what size, how deep, has to be requisitioned from Kettle River area in Minnesota, brought down on the train, of course. Timbers have to be requisitioned. The railroad was never short on wood. And windows had to be sized and built, doors had to be built, and they had to move the existing small wooden depot. This is the only known photo of the original Princeton Depot. You can see the mill at the right, down at the end of the street. But you can see, I think, the similarities of this depot with the Pease Depot. And this depot had to be, had to be lifted up, and it was taken across the street temporarily so they could start digging a foundation for this big new behemoth. Princeton did not need a 215-foot-long brick and stone depot. Just didn't. This was a political power play. It was pork barrel politics. It was Bob Dunn bringing home the bacon for Princeton, and he did.
Wow,
That's
that's
cool.
cool.
And that's what we have today, right?
That's the one, yeah. And it has a dug foundation. There's a basement underneath.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of secrets down there. Lots of secrets. We don't tell just anybody, you know. We've got an attic up in the depot also.
I cannot wait till part 2 with Barry Schreiber.
I know.
Just say it. There's good stuff up in the attic also. And then they had to build the brick walls on top of the stone foundation. The brick came from
Brickton.
Yeah, 3 miles away. 285,000 Brickton bricks. The walls are made 3 courses of brick thick, which was the style at the time.
Yeah.
It's durable, as you can see, and then, you know, it's August, September. They're framing the building in. The brickwork is done. They're slipping in the windows and doors, and it comes time to put the roof on. It's November, you know, in Minnesota.
Feel that.
I feel you, bro. There are 90,000 cedar shake shingles on the roof of that building. And how would you like to be working in December, banging those things into place up on the roof?
No, thanks.
No thanks.
No, Zach's been doing that lately. He's building a house right now.
Not quite the same
No.
style, but
But the thing got done at breakneck speed. So
that's crazy to
It
think
is.
about all this stuff. Like when you think about how fast a house can be built today,
Oh,
it's like,
yeah.
oh yeah, 3 months.
Yeah.
You know, but
An
This-
entirely brick.
and
Yeah.
it's brick.
but back
Yeah.
then, and then for what you're like,
Yeah.
all the wood, the glass, the
And can I remind you, there's no such thing as power tools back in the day.
Oh,
Right.
sure.
We're sawing wood.
no
my
Maquitas
gosh.
here.
The old
Yeah.
school way.
Honestly.
I was up repairing
miserable.
a panel in the soffit once upon a time. By the way, there it is, Princeton, hub of the potato world.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah. I was up in the soffit repairing some damage, and I was up on a ladder, and I saw something, you know, kind of pinwheel down to the ground. You know, something fell out of the soffit, and I got down off the ladder, and I looked at it. It was looked like a mainspring of a clock, but it was all made out of wood. And then it occurred to me, this was a plane shaving that came off when somebody was hand planing a piece up
Wow.
above. Yeah. So yeah, we're reminded. There's just little souvenirs of
Right.
time around the place that, if you know what to look for, where to look, you can find that stuff. So there was a great party. They hired a special train to bring people down from Malacca in 1903, because Princeton at that time was the county seat. Malacca, you may know the sad story, stole it from Princeton in 1920. The rats,
Part 3.
Yes, exactly. The rival.
dark history there. Yeah, we're having some fun with the stories. You know, the place is full of stories.
Absolutely.
And the town is full of stories, and we're having fun discovering those and sharing those. That's part of what we're trying to do. We're reorganizing the interior of the depot building. There were 10 years ago, there were lots of display cases with kind of fun old stuff in them. And, you know, that was nice. But instead of being Princeton's largest antique store with nothing for sale, we want to move into being the county's best history storyteller.
Yep.
So we've got 6 bays that are designed in the south waiting room. The first one is going to be about logging and lumbering. The second bay is going to be about the 2 depots of Princeton. Teaser, a family lived in the depot when the depot was in railroad service in the 1960s. The station master's family lived in the depot. I know. And the third bay that's completed is Brickton. You know, our story about Brickton, which has been fascinating to discover. So come on down. We've got good stories.
Absolutely.
Many of them true.
Good to know.
Stop. No, they're all true.
I cannot wait to go to the
all
basement.
true.
I know.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's what's going on at the Mille Lacs County Historical Society. We're doing our best and making great progress at collecting, preserving, and presenting information about the colorful and interesting past that this area has.
It is so cool. I mean, I encourage everybody to
Yep.
stop in there. Like Barry said, Wednesdays and Fridays, sorry. But there's just so many cool things, and there's so many different stories, and we will definitely have you back on to talk about the Umbacher, or
Umbacher.
because I love that ice. That ice story is so cool, and just the
Yeah.
story of the river and the logging and
Yeah.
down by Riverside Park, and there's just so
There's
much
so many.
to tell.
Yeah, we got the pictures too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. 10,000 words apiece. Yeah.
Well, you heard it. Thank you for tuning in today, and thank you, Barry, so much for coming in. We appreciate it. Thank you for the props and the knowledge and all the history that you brought with
You
you.
bet.
Well, we'll be back again on our next podcast, May 9th. Until then, this is Zach, Kim, and Mary signing off.
Podcast
This
produced
is
by
Princeton.
Kitzman
Stay
Creations.
here,
Music
play
by
here,
Charles Moe.
shop here.
Be sure to subscribe to the Princeton Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, to view our awkward moments, check us out on our YouTube channel and visit us at www.thisisprincetonmn.co.